Hello, friends, and welcome back. Here at To Which Isle, we talk about spirituality and mental health and how they work together. On today's episode, we are going to talk about expectations. We shifted topics a little if you watched the last, but this one we felt we needed to talk about. I'm your host, Charmaine.
And I'm Krystle.
Sometimes I forget that part. All right. So, expectations. What does your expectation mean? Your expectations are your strong hopes or beliefs that something will happen or that you will get something that you want. And that is what having an expectation means. Krystle?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like expectations are you are looking for a particular outcome by your thoughts. And your thoughts are creating a reality in your mind that may or may not exist with the outcome of whatever it is that you have an expectation on.
Right. And let me just say that expectations can be good. I mean, we can expect our mother to take care of us. We can expect certain things. However, when they don't end up being truth, then they become a little bit harmful. Having expectations are kind of derived when you're a kid and you kind of learn how the way the world works. But when you have too strong of a belief that it's the one way the world works, that's when expectations really get you into trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best way to avoid disappointment is to not have any expectations in it.
And let me just
So-
say, it is hard to not have expectations. You want to expect the best from people. But what I've found is that I cannot possibly expect everyone to behave in the same manner that I do. I can't expect everybody around me to have the same perspective I do because they didn't grow up the way that I do. So there's many different ways to live, and having expectations that any one thing is going to be one certain way, you have to remember that there's another party involved in that, whether it's your partner, whether it's a child, whether it's grandparents, it doesn't matter who the relationship is with. If you have too much of an expectation that has nothing to do with their view of life, you may be setting yourself up for a little bit of disappointment.
Right, absolutely. Expectation is the root of all heartache.
Yes.
That's a quote.
Yes.
I don't know who said it. It is a quote. And that is the absolute bottom line truth. So, to me, there are two different types of expectations. There's the expectations, well, I guess there could be three. There's the expectations that you have for a particular outcome with, natural things. Or there's expectations that you put on other people. And as I am learning lately, there are expectations that you put upon yourself,
Oh,
all of
yes,
which
indeed.
are very hard, especially if you're an overthinker. Overthinkers have more expectations, I think, than anybody. I know that I used to, always get so upset whenever an outcome did not turn out the way that I expected. Obviously, and so, but and there were tears involved, or anger involved, or any other lashing out emotion that you can think of, all based on just the fact that I let my brain take over and take control instead of just allowing what was to come to come. I had an expectation on it. Therefore, I had an investment in the outcome being a particular way. And so, like, let's see where's an example that I could, okay, so a wife has, her husband, she has expected him to be home at a certain time. And whenever that, maybe it's her birthday, maybe it's their anniversary, maybe, he had called and promised, hey, get all gussied up, we're going to go out for dinner, any one of those things. And so the expectation is that he's going to be home at a certain time. And whenever an hour goes by and he's not there, and you get a little ruffled because he said he was going to be there and we were going to do this thing. And okay, and then another hour passes and they're just like, well, yeah. And then, it keeps on, and maybe he's 4 or 5 hours late getting home from what you expected. And then whenever he gets there, you're just all fired up and blah, blah, blah. But you know what that could have been? And what you didn't consider is that there was an emergency at work. There was something that had to be taken care of. There was something, so, there was a reason for the delay. And because you were so invested in expecting a certain time, whenever you left that, and when that time went past, you let yourself get upset because it wasn't when you wanted or wasn't when you thought it should be. And
Right.
so
And
that's where your expectation gets you.
you're exactly. And sometimes you get so fired up in those emotions of what should be happening that you also fail to realize that you have a part in that communication to play. All you have to do is send a text message, lift up the phone and give a phone call and say, "Hey, are you going to be late?" And you know what? You might get that explanation a lot sooner than the 5 hours later that it took for him to actually get off work and come home.
Right. Absolutely.
But we get fired up in our emotions sometimes, and they take over and they keep us held in a place where we can't get to the next step, which is problem solve. What can I do to fix this right now? What can I do? Whatever. Now, with the same, there's like extremes when it comes to this. When we come from a place of trauma and we have expectations, our expectations usually tend to be a little bit extreme and not exactly close to even what reality would be. I'll give you a really tiny example of a expectation. When I was a kid, I expected my birthday every year to be an off the hook celebration. I should be getting flowers and balloons and cards, and everybody should love me on my birthday. But what would happen year after year is that my birthday would pass sometimes without anybody even noticing. So I took it to the other extreme. When I was a kid, I desired this big lavish thing. I learned that I shouldn't expect a damn thing, and I took it the other way to the extreme, to where I went to birthdays where I hated them. I didn't want to be a part of the celebration of my birth, no matter what it was. I didn't want a card. I didn't want flowers. I didn't want anybody to acknowledge me. But in turn, that would make me still feel terrible. And I was perpetuating that terribleness with the behavior that was extreme because I done this since I was 7, 8, 10, 16. It was a belief I set in my head that now I shouldn't be celebrated at all, but I also had changed my own self-worth in those expectations. I just expected everybody to treat me like poop because that's how I was treated my whole life. So why not just expect it so that you don't get that hurt? That's an extreme. It's extreme thinking. Overthinkers have that problem. And it's a hard thing to unwind from yourself.
Right. And then, like, so I mean, like, what happens, what are some of the feelings that we experience whenever our expectations are not met? Like, well, there's disappointment, obviously, right? There's um frustration, anger, sadness. These are all
Sometimes shame and
emotions.
guilt. Shame and guilt.
Shame, guilt. Yeah, absolutely. And those are all emotions that do what? They are a trigger for your brain to be able to say, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. And if you're upset about those things, and it's always you. It's never the other person. It's always you, and they're just your mirror. They are just reflecting back to you what it is that is within you needs healing. And so if you are being very, quick to get triggered by your own expectations, and you have these emotions, they're literally pinpointing to you, this is what you need to fix, this is what you need to change, this is how you can't be angry about your own thoughts, so change your thoughts.
Oh yeah, I've had to go back and change a lot of thoughts about self over the year. My expectations for myself, um, which it's crazy to think that I would think so low of myself, considering my background and how much I have overcome and where I am at now in life. It's it's hard to believe that I was ever a person that was just a self-sabotager, that had nothing nice to say about myself. Somebody could pay me a really high compliment and I would brush it off and tell them, "Oh no, but this is why that's not true." And you should never be like that. You should always accept somebody else's perception of you, no matter what that is, because you don't know what they've been through and what they see in you. You don't know who you are in their eyes. You have no idea. And it's actually none of your business either. However, sometimes I used to fall in that trap, like, oh, they must think these terrible things of me, or they must think this of me. I had to learn to let go of those thoughts, because it is none of my business what they think of me. They can think whatever. All that matters is what I think about myself. And I'm okay with myself. I actually kind of love myself now. So I'm way better than being in that place where I absolutely loathed myself, and my negative self-talk was so damaging. I held myself to a standard that was unattainable, and then I would berate myself when I couldn't attain it. That's who I was to myself, and I'm proud to say that I was able to shift that perspective to something else, but it really took being able to feel the emotion that I was experiencing and go, "Okay, wow, I'm feeling fearful. Is it really fear? Maybe it's anger. Oh, yeah, that's anger. Okay, now why am I feeling angry?" I have to get to that place where I can problem solve what is affecting me. And then if it's something that's affecting me negatively, it needs to be moved from my life, because I can't live that way anymore. As I've gotten older, I've become less tolerant of those who speak only about the bad stuff that happens to them and never has anything good to share with me, because I don't want to surround myself with that anymore. I'm trying to surround myself in light and love. And in order to do that, I have to become that myself. I have to expect that from myself, not this unattainable me in my head that was made up and fictional and can do anything, because I'm not perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So like that kind of brings us around to, the expectations of yourself.
Mhm.
And I struggle. I'm like literally working on this right now, and is having unrealistic expectations of yourself instead of just allowing yourself to be who you are, and be um and have the knowledge that where you are is exactly where you're supposed to be at any given moment,
Mhm.
which is like a surrender, which is like a trust. And where I can do that outwardly for everything else, it's like whenever I think of where I am and maybe in my spiritual practice, for example, and I really have to keep in mind that everything is cyclical. And so you have ebb and you have flow, you have ups and you have downs. it's polarity. It all is, you know, it, it has a flow to it that just moves you. Sometimes you are like in a really happy, you know, blissed out state, and other times maybe you're like really depressive and low. And it's all about, you know, coming into and finding that balance together where it, you know, the highs aren't so high and the lows aren't so low, and it's all right there down the center, if that makes sense at all. And so the expectations of self are they're very hard to overcome, because it's like you beat yourself up whenever you don't do what you want, or get the outcome that you expected. Maybe you are, your expectation is for someone to validate you, to say that, you know, oh, look at you, you are so spectacular, and woo, go you, or whatever your validation happens to be that you're looking for. And you don't get that. You know, it's all about really managing expectations for yourself. You know, set goals. Always set goals. Like, I am going to achieve, but like it's not failure if you don't achieve it right off the bat. It's going back at it again and again and again until you achieve the goal that you want. And that's how I have started really, really managing my expectations, knowing that I have a goal, and this is what I would like this goal to be like, but allowing that goal to take on its own form and being able to flow with it whenever it changes. You know, it's not always going to be the same thing. A painting doesn't start out, you know, beautiful. It starts out as a white canvas, right?
Yep. A blank white canvas, it starts. And then, even then, the first few strokes a painting does not make.
No.
Um,
Layers.
yes, yes. And, you know, when you set goals, as long as you're setting realistic goals, um, your expectations can be managed at that point as to what you're going to achieve. But having the expectation that something is going to happen in ABC style, and then having it not, is going to leave you open to big disappointments. Expecting people to validate your life for you so that you know you're making the right choices is a very bad thing to rely on, because you've got tons of people around you with different perspectives of life. Even my own brother has a different perspective of life than I do, and we grew up together. We have totally different perspectives. And I think that's what you have to remember, is the fact that those perspectives are going to create different expectations among different people. So, holding on to that expectation as it has to happen is what gets you in trouble. Um, I just try to expect the unexpected. If you practice expecting the unexpected, then whatever pops up is probably going to be like, oh, that was unexpected. And all of those things are really just learning processes. They're opportunities to learn and grow. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to talk about the emotions involved with that. When we're feeling bad emotions, we're just going to bring more bad emotions to us. If we're feeling bad about one aspect of something, if we don't jump to problem solving that to make yourself feel better, you're going to end up spiraling into that bad feeling because you're bringing more of it to you. It's jumping to that place where you can go, look, this is my situation, and I either can solve it by doing maybe this, maybe that, maybe there's options to solve the problem, maybe there's no option to solve the problem. That sometimes happens where you have no control over what is happening. It isn't your responsibility to control that either, but you do have the responsibility to control how you act when the unexpected happens. If the unexpected happens and you fly off the handle and you hurt other people's feelings, then guess what? You're probably kind of an asshole. So, being able to reel that in before you fly off the handle and make other people feel bad, or maybe it's that you're talking about a subject that could potentially cause somebody else to feel bad. For instance, I had a moment where somebody triggered that in me by bringing up um, not even a situation that happened with her, it happened between other people. And she wanted to get into it with me and berate one of those people. And I can't do that. I cannot justify that kind of behavior. I'm not going to attack one person, but I'm also not going to take one thing I read to gospel truth. Everybody's entitled to their experience and the way they experience a certain situation. And I'm not going to be one to tell them they're wrong, nor am I going to be the one to sanctify somebody else as this very good person, because you know what? I don't live with that person. I don't know what they're like, and my perspective could be off.
Right. And like, I mean, it goes back to, basically perceptions are, because everybody has a different one. And so
Mhm.
our expectations, again, are based off of our experiences and off of our perceptions, off of our ego. It's all, you know, shows us, I mean, like somebody that is with the flow of life just kind of, was like, oh, well, that was interesting, or oh, well, that kind of sucked. On to the next. It's always just being more present, and that's what it is. It's your having expectations really takes you out of the present moment and puts you into the future. You're
Yes.
what you are expecting to happen, the outcome that you want, or think you need, or whatever. And it's just that's having expectations is not being mindful.
Yes. And we already covered that one in both meditation and mindfulness, that being mindful and being present is very important. And you're exactly right. Sometimes our expectations really throw us from past events, will throw us into future worries about what is happening when we really need to be present. What can I do right now in this moment to make myself feel better?
Yeah, absolutely.
Am I
I
frozen
mean,
on your end?
no.
Okay. As long as I'm not frozen on your end, I'm frozen on my end. I
Mercury is in reverse
Mercury
house all
retrograde. Why are you doing this to me? Why can't you be more Freddy instead of Mercury? Ah. Oh, okay. Expectations. Oh, I wanted to go just touch on that validation portion one more little bit. We cannot expect other people to validate our actions and everybody to be okay with them, because you know what? I am not everybody's cup of tea. I might be somebody's shot of whiskey. And that holds some big truth in it, because you just can't expect that from other people. You really have to learn that that validation has to come from you. You are in charge of your meat suit, your magical skeleton, whatever you want to call it. You are in charge. Therefore, your opinion is the highest opinion you should be taking of yourself. You should have that ability to compliment yourself in the highest manner possible instead of degrading yourself.
Yeah,
It is
absolutely.
important to have your own validation.
Yeah, like trying to think, like I struggled with validation a lot whenever I was a child. I
Because you
would,
expected your parents to validate you. You expect that.
right, but like, I mean, like, I definitely went after validation. Like, look what I did. Didn't I do good? Like, yeah, a lot. I don't really so much do that anymore. I'm confident in who I am as a person, so I don't need outside validation. But there are people that, definitely seek it. And I mean, I know some people that seek it with ferocity,
Oh,
and to the
yes.
point where it makes and where it will actually make me extremely uncomfortable. I just
I get
am like,
tired. I get uncomfortable and tired. Like I have a hard time like validating other people because I realize that sometimes they need it, sometimes they don't. And I kind of judge it by myself that way. But I find that it's exhausting. It's exhausting having somebody in your life that needs constant validation, constantly being told they're making the right choices because, girl, I got to live my own life. Like, I got to figure out my own stuff going on. Like, I cannot be on top of your life knowing every aspect and validating you every moment. That's actually your job. Your own job is to validate your own self. Um to have your own gauge of what you're doing and be confident in who you are at any given moment because life is designed to be painful. Like we cannot have pain and sadness, so we cannot have happiness if we don't have pain and sadness. We won't appreciate happiness if we don't have the opposite of that. We have to experience both so that we understand what each of them are. Otherwise, it's just we wouldn't know if you were blissfully happy all the time. It wouldn't be realistic. And I find that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with uncomfortable feelings. But if you're having uncomfortable feelings, just accept that that's where you are today. Today, you're a little uncomfortable, but tomorrow can bring so much more if you just go ahead and allow yourself to be what you are at any given moment. A lot of us
right.
as kids are taught that our emotions are improper, like moody teenagers. I mean, there's cliches left and right about all that stuff. And and that's probably more harmful than helpful because your emotions are valid. If you're having a sad day, it's okay to have a sad day. That's going to make the next happy day that much better.
Moody teenagers. I'm experiencing that right now. My son's
I
14. He's gonna be
that
15
I've
in
grown through
July.
3. I've
Yeah.
grown through 3 of them.
He- I'm hopefully taking a different approach to motherhood throughout discovering spirituality. I'm sure that I've done my fair share of screwing up
We all
before
do.
then.
We all
Yeah.
do. We
But,
all
you know,
know we all can't do better until we know better.
right. Well, my son, I'm the moody teenager, made me think of this. And he just the other day, he walks in and he just goes, "Ugh." I'm like, what's wrong, buddy? "Ugh." Okay, dude, what's going on? What's up? Tell me what it is. He's like, I'm just going through an existential crisis. I don't want to live or or I don't want a life. I don't want a life right now. It's just like, oh,
When
welcome to teenage
when
hormones,
right?
buddy.
I used to say, "Stop the world, I wanna get off," when I was a kid, all the time.
Oh, I think he does it all the time. Oh.
One way to manage those expectations is good communication. Good communication with whoever you have this expectation with will help immensely. Um, if you're not communicating, you can have an expectation, but if they don't know about this expectation you have on them, then how would they possibly ever get it done for you? Like, they have to know what you're expecting, if that makes
Right.
sense. Like, that's
Yeah.
how it works for work. You must talk. If you have that expectation your spouse is going to be home at X time for dinner, it needs to be voiced that there's that expectation. And if they aren't going to follow through with that expectation, there should be something in place that says, hey, you're going to communicate to me when my expectation is not going to be met. That's kind of how it works, and I will be the first to admit that I didn't realize this necessity of communication when I was first really learning to manage my expectations.
Oh yeah, communication is absolutely key. Like going back to the husband-wife scenario before. It there was no communication in that. There was initial communication, right? But there was no follow-through communication. There was no the wife didn't call or text and say, "Hey, I figured you'd be home by now. What's up?" And at the same time, the husband didn't take 5 seconds to call or text his wife to say, hey, something's come up. I'm going to be a little late. So communication is extremely important. So how do you learning to communicate is one and effectively communicate. That was one of the classes that I got to partake in, which was really, really, really neat.
Uh-huh.
And but learning to communicate effectively is
Mhm.
goes a long way in helping you manage your expectations for sure.
Right. And we'll put right on top of that boundaries. Boundaries are very important. That whole husband wife situation with the dinner time, that could be a wife boundary. Well, boundary setting requires certain elements to be present, one of them being consequences as to if this does not happen.
Right, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to shift gears just a tiny bit. It's still the same
Okay.
topic, but I want to this is something that, like comparing yourself to others
Okay. Mhm.
is
Mhm.
another way of not managing your expectations. I
Right.
believe social media is the worst form or the best example, as it were, to lay it out. Like, because think, you're friends with so and so that you went to elementary school with, and you probably haven't seen them in 20 years, but you see they have a big house, they have a nice car, they have the rich husband, or whatever you did, whatever, and you don't feel like you are in the same place that they are in life. That's making a comparison. And then, therefore, you're shooting your own expectations in the foot. And then, so you do that. And then but the thing that you're not taking into consideration is that social media is not an accurate portrayal of reality. Nobody's putting their lows on Facebook unless they're seeking validation and seeking, like oh, poor you. Oh, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. That's, fishing for validation there. Or, they're not putting any of the bad stuff. They are only putting the highlights, the best of the best of the best moments. But in reality, Bobby Joe could be beaten by her husband every day and you don't know it.
Right.
You know, because so social media is not a good way to manage any expectations at all.
Oh gosh, no. Gosh, no. And, comparisons can be good if you're comparing yourself to who you were, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I do self comparisons all the time. However, I have definitely moved away from looking at other people's lives on social media and thinking to myself, man, I'm a deadbeat, or I haven't accomplished nearly as much, or look at all they're doing. Why can't I do that too? You know what? It all comes down to really learning to accept yourself where you're at, managing that expectation that you can't be everything. can't be absolutely excellent or 100% at everything. But you know what? I can gain knowledge here and I can gain knowledge here and here. And you know what? I have this wealth of knowledge. Even though I wasn't the best at everything, I have a lot of knowledge about a lot of stuff up to then. And, you have to just embrace yourself where you are. We're all at different places. There is no timeline on life that everybody must follow. It isn't, we're born, we're raised by our parents, we graduate high school, we find a job, we find a spouse, we get married, we have kids. It isn't like that anymore. That's not the way the world is supposed to be. There is no supposed to be. There is you and what you're accomplishing and doing. It is your own timeline. There are many paths to the same destination. We're all born to die. So, getting from here to there, it can look like anything and it doesn't matter. Just don't judge it. Try not to judge yourself.
Right, absolutely. And you just brought up like a whole nother topic of expectations too, is societal expectations.
Yes, yes.
Society has imprinted on us that, as well, I'll use just women as an example. Society has impressed upon us that it is our duty, it is our job, that the first thing that we must do as women is catch a man, keep that man, convince that man that he needs to put a ring on your finger, marry that man, buy a house with that man, buy 2 cars with that man, get a dog, get a cat, and then pop out a few kids. That is what society has impressed upon us is what we should do. That is what we are meant to do, is to procreate, essentially. but you
Right.
gotta you gotta find the right man, and
Mhm.
he's got to have a good job, and he's got to treat you a certain way, and there's all of these things. And then for men, there's another expectation that society has put on men. They cannot show emotion. They have to be tough, and they have to be rugged, and they have to be a man's man. And there's all of these, like, they can't like flowers, and they can't be passionate. There's all of these standards that are impressed upon us, and they are societal expectations.
Mhm. Society and culture, because,
Yes.
if you take us right out of the United States and over to China or Japan, their culture is a little bit different, but it is impressed on them hard too. So, it's keeping in mind that there are all these expectations on who we should be, and to take those away and try to just be present. That's so easier said than done.
Yeah. Yes. It is most definitely easier said than done. Like, I mean, and that's the whole thing, is like, and I don't know the exact quote, but it was Ram Dass, and he says, you have trauma. You don't ever lose the trauma. You just manage it better. And so you take, and it transmutes down to where it's a big, big, big thing. And then as you work on it, as you heal, as you have personal growth, that thing goes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, your triggers, as it were. And you, until the point where you now notice it. Oh, I used to be affected by that thing. Now it is just a pinprick. It's never gone. It's always there, but
Oh,
it is so small that it doesn't have an effect on you anymore. So it's all, we're never going to grow past it. There's never a point where it's just completely gone. And I think that that is a major thing that most people have an expectation on, that I'm going to do all of this work on myself and I'm going to just completely get rid of. No, that's not how it works. It's going to come back around and come back around in that cyclical nature, and it's going to sting you every single time. But you start getting antibodies to the sting. The poison isn't as bad.
Yep. I wanted to piggyback on that with having the expectation that you're going to go into a mental health professional, get your medications, and suddenly you are going to be healed. That's not how this works at all. If you're
Right.
from if you're coming from a place of trauma and you go to mental health, that was my first expectation, was they're going to give me a magic pill, and that magic pill is going to make me all better. But that isn't what happened. What happened was I went in and I got medication that was supposed to help some of the things that I was experiencing, like high anxiety and bipolar fluctuations with my moods. Um, that's just there to help. If I do not have the emotional intelligence to get myself out of my emotional mind and add in that problem solving skill, I would still be stuck in my spiral. I would be spiraling on whatever negative emotion I was feeling at any one given time, which at the height of my trauma treatment was a whole lot of thoughts that weren't truth, only partial accuracies that I had picked up from my childhood. And my expectation was set s- to the point that I would never achieve anything in life. I was never going to be even a big deal to myself. I was just scum. So those expectations kept me very limited for a long time on myself until I was able to change my perspective of myself. And that went back to that deep trauma work and that shadow work of drudging up all those horrible things that happened to me and actually looking them and finding the truth. The truth of the matter was that I didn't ask for any of my traumas to happen to me. In fact, I even said no a few times, and even that wasn't listened to. Those were out of my control. If I say no and the other person doesn't listen to me, I don't have control over what that person is going to do to me after that point. I didn't have any control over my childhood trauma. I didn't have any control during my military trauma either. So I have to remember that that is a big fact. The fact that my brain has decided to rewire itself to make myself survive, that in essence, what I did was I deadened all of my emotions, so I wasn't feeling them anymore because I didn't wanna feel the bad emotions. In order to not feel the bad emotions, if you tuck those down and drown those away, guess what? You're never gonna feel the good emotions either because you've just deadened your sensing system. You can't just sense good and not sense bad. And that's where a lot of people get hung up is they wanna turn off all of those bad experiences, those uncomfortable emotions, and and in doing so, you've just deaden the rest of your experience because you can't feel the good without the bad.
Yeah, like a woman once, without naming any names, obviously, but was talking about how we put it in a box,
Yes.
then we shut the box, and then we put the box in the basement,
Well,
and then
guess
something
what?
else comes along.
That box starts to build pressure. It's like that's like shoving a balloon under the water or a beach ball. When that ball finally pops out of the water, it's going to pop out of the water with force. And that's what happens when you box up those emotions and put them on the shelf and hide them in the basement and try not to go back to them. In
Right.
doing so, you are deadening your awareness of yourself. And when you do that, you may not realize the people around you you hurt in that process because you're unaware of it.
Right. And this particular woman had all of her boxes on nice, neat, stacked shelves that all of them had labels on them. She knew exactly what was in each one of them. They were just, very, very organized basement of shelves and boxes. And, and her coming into a spiritual awakening, she was like, I don't understand why my boxes keep getting opened. And I was like, oh, honey, you just wait. The spiritual awakening, really what it does is it produces an earthquake. And it
Yeah,
just dumps all your boxes out on the basement floor. And then
right.
you have to deal with all of it. There's no putting it back in the boxes because the boxes got destroyed.
Mhm.
Now what?
Yep. It's like all those boxes just crumble apart, water tear away, and now you're left with the stuff. And the stuff wasn't as small as when you put it in the box. It's bigger now.
Oh no, the earthquake, it caused a flood and now it's all freaking absorbed. It's like
It's
poof.
waterlogged. I laugh, but when that happens, it's not fun. And I will say it happened to me because I did not know how to deal with, I was never taught how to deal with my emotions. And I had big emotions from being a kid and my childhood trauma that just rolled right into adulthood and turned into bigger problems. I chose a spouse based on being able to keep me safe until he couldn't keep me safe anymore, until he was the one hurting me. It's, and I'm not saying physically, I'm saying it emotionally. He just was not in a place that he even had the capacity to deal with my emotions because I'm not sure he knew how to deal with his. And that's the society that we were stuck in. I spent my 20s and my early 30s struggling so hard. And when I was 38, I think is when I entered therapy. That's when my life fell apart. That's when my divorce was happening, all of that stuff. That was the earthquake. That was everything getting dumped out on the floor. And then it was me frantically trying to figure out how to survive in the chaos that was my life at that point. And now when I look back, I remember struggling hard, but I also look back and I see where I created a lot of my own struggles by my worry thoughts, by my overthinking, by my cognitive distortions that were keeping my beliefs in a place where nothing could change. Nothing could change beyond the belief set that I have. And that's what needed to change for me. I had to open up and eh, become able to flow. I was trying to fight all of the currents. I was like, you're trying to swim upstream when all you really have to do is sit on an inner tube and float down. I was struggling. I was trying to swim upstream because I needed to control it. I needed to control it because if I couldn't control it, it was going to go out of control. That's a lie I told myself. That is what my ego told me. I was going to go out of control if I couldn't experience the anger that I experienced as a kid. So it had to be shut off. It had to be severed and put someplace where I never put it out. And that's where I continued to poison myself because I was holding on to that anger as it was. And I needed to be able to let that go. Now I'm in a place where I've let that go and I'm very much in flow instead of trying to swim upstream any further. Now I'm sitting on the inner tube with my cocktail, floating downstream, enjoying the weather because it's not stormy anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. You're speaking to like, I mean, the control, and then the little light bulb in my head just got through going, well, having to have a certain amount of control or being a controlling person is a trauma in and of itself, right?
Yep.
But also, we're speaking about expectations, and a person's need for control is not being able to manage expectations. It is, whether it's a need for control of the project you're working on, maybe it's a need for control of your emotions, maybe it's a need for a lot of those things, but having that trauma response of needing to control is in and of itself one of the most detrimental things, I think, to managing your expectations healthily.
Absolutely. That's exactly it is, that it's an illusion of control anyway. I mean, to be honest, we don't have much control in anything in our lives. Our heart beats on its own. We don't have control over that. Which is
Right.
why meditation and mindfulness are so important because those are the things that bring you back into your body. And having, you know, having the expectation that you're going to feel any given way at any given time, or that you should be feeling a certain way at any given point at any given time, is such a harmful expectation. Being able to flow with the universe, being able to be like that willow tree and bend in the wind instead of being stiff and rigid and getting knocked down every time something bad happens. We don't have to get knocked completely down. Um, we don't have to get knocked down and roll around in the muck and sorrow and why is me? We don't have to do that. We can get knocked down and get right back up and keep moving forward instead of falling into that pit of despair. The pit of despair. Sorry, I had a Princess Bride moment.
One of my most favorite musicians and artists is Eric Church. And he has a song. It's called Smoke a Little Smoke. And there is and there's a line in it that just, I mean, and that I'm sorry, but I believe that song is a very enlightened song. But there's a point in it where it says, I set my course for a new destination, but the wind got in my way. So he just changed. I'm like going to mess it up because I'm like, I don't want to sing it. But but it's like, that's, you just change your course.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you do. Like that's the same thing, just flowing. Well, something got in your way, and you just change your course.
If you can be flexible in your expectations, if, you can have expectations and prepare for what will happen if they don't fall in those things. But it's just like, having the expectation it isn't going to rain on your wedding day when you're planning your wedding day in spring and it could very well possibly rain because you're planning it so far out. You can't have that expectations, but what you can do is plan for it and then manage what is going to happen. So it rains. Guess what? Now I'm going to do outside wedding pictures in the rain with my makeup running, but it's going to be a beautiful picture anyway, because it's going to remind me of this, and this. Change your ability to flow with it. Don't have such rigid expectations.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, I think, well, we managed expectations really well.
We had a change of course.
We had a change of course and it worked well. All right. Well, I think that wraps up our show on expectations. Of course, reach out to us if you have any questions. You can find us on our website at www.towhichaisle.com. You can find us on Facebook. I always forget the Facebook one. To Which Isle, and you can find us on YouTube and Buzzsprout for your podcast pleasure.
And did we say as always?
Not yet. You can say that part.
And as always, we ask you to take what resonates and leave the rest.
You know what? I like having our podcasts on a topic we didn't plan without a whole lot of notes and just winging it. I think we do pretty fabulous either way.
I think so too.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this episode and we hope to see you next time.
All right. Until next time.